Hey, Rebel Rouser, this is Allven Voivod from Star Wars 7x7, and you're listening to the Holochronicles. Punch it!
You tuned in to the Holochronicles!
I'm as far and ready.
At this time, I'd like to welcome in our guest for today's podcast. If you've been listening to Star Wars podcasts for any amount of time, you guys have probably heard the name Allven Voivod. He is the host and creator of the Star Wars 7x7 podcast, which means 7 days a week, 7 minutes a day, 365 days a year. Allven, thank you for joining us on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Awesome. Josh and I are longtime listeners to your pod, so we're pretty excited to have you here. But let me ask you first, Allven, what made you think I'm going to do a daily podcast for 5 years in a row?
You know, if you had told me 5 years ago that I would have done it for 5 years straight, I probably would have said you were crazy, and there was no way that would have happened. It's all been very much one foot in front of the other. But I knew that with Star Wars restarting when it was sold by Lucas to Disney, that we were going to get, new stories. And then when Disney rebooted the canon in April of 2014, I knew that, okay, we're going to get, a lot more stories. And I had been following the original expanded universe back in the day, but not to be a little too much for me to keep up with. And I got to a point where I let it go. And with the rebooting of the canon, I realized not only can I, hold this stuff all in my head, but now we have these tools where we can talk about all these things much more readily and, archive it as well. So now I have my own repository of all, the things that I've talked about on the show and all these new stories. And I feel so much more connected to the mythology than I ever have.
That's pretty cool. So you must be a big Star Wars fan then.
Hey, comme si, comme ça. Yes, you could say that.
Does that mean you saw any of the original movies in theaters?
I'm told that I did, but I don't remember seeing Star Wars or Empire in theaters. My first strong memory is seeing Return of the Jedi in theaters and seeing it, I think, the day after it came out and sitting through 2 straight showings and just being blown away.
That's like us. We have the same history with Star Wars. Is Jedi is my first memory of being in the theater. Although I was told I was at a drive-in for Empire, and I think it was conceived during Star Wars. That's my hope.
That's pretty powerful.
So
Josh, are you a Death Star baby?
Yeah, there you go. I'm a Death Star baby. Hey, all right. So are you?
Yes. So.
All right. Woohoo! That's fantastic.
I guess I'll jump in on this one then. Allven, we have talked about Death Star babies in the last couple of podcasts and who's likely to have been the result of a celebratory consummation after one of the Death Stars have blown up. We've only come up with a couple so far. Definitely Ben after Death Star 2 and
DS2. We call it DS2.
And there's a definite possibility that Paige Tico, her age lines up anyway. I don't know if it's canon by any means, but is there any off the top of your head that you could maybe fit in that timeline, the 29 or 34-ish year old new canon characters?
I think it was one of you guys who suggested that Armitage Hux might be a DS1 baby, that his dad, Brendel Hux, might have had relations with the kitchen worker that he had Armitage with, since Armitage is illegitimate.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Hux the bastard.
Yeah. I was, Poe Dameron doesn't fit because he's too ABY. So he was 2 years old. But I was wondering at some point if Poe might have had a sibling, because they do show his parents in, what looks like a situation like that the night of the celebration after DS2 blew up. So, but I haven't seen any reference to a sibling of Poe's at any point. So it'd be fun to think that Zori Bliss will turn out to be his younger sister or something like that.
Yeah, there's with one more movie coming out, I suppose there could be a new character or two that could possibly fit in our crazy idea that there are Death Star babies out there in the universe.
I'm going with at least 127 of the stormtroopers.
Yeah, they got drafted in. They're probably officer age by this point. Yeah.
Hey, what about Phasma? We don't know. There you go, Phasma.
Possible.
See, Alan's the one who's going to know. No, actually, she was born.
Yeah. So, Alan, with this wealth of knowledge that you've acquired since you've been doing the podcast, have you ever entered any of the trivia, the Star Wars trivia, the big things?
No, I haven't. And, I every once in a while I think about it, and I had thought about it at Celebration Chicago, but because there's so much other stuff going on, I'm more addicted, I guess, to doing my own thing as related to the podcast. And so I haven't done the trivia thing. Maybe if they do it again in Anaheim in 2020, I would do it. But they seem to have a lot more trivia and game show things at Celebration this time in Chicago than they did in Orlando in the past. This seems to be becoming a much bigger thing than it's ever been, which is kind of cool. Have you guys done any stuff like that?
No, we haven't. Actually, our first celebration is going to be Anaheim, so we're pretty excited about that. Are you going to be there?
Yes, I am. That's awesome. I get to meet you guys in person.
It's going to be so much fun.
That'll be cool.
We got Pete Fletzer is going to be there as well, so I think we're going to have a pod party. Who else? WSTR guys?
And Scarif will be there. Yeah. Anybody with a microphone is probably going to be there, but
we're going to have to cut out. We're going to have to cut out time to do other stuff besides hang out with each other.
Yeah. It'll be be the biggest the most expensive hangout ever. Buy some toys along the way too. So one of the things we'd like to talk about here, Alan, is collecting and you had mentioned just in our correspondence back and forth that at different times you have collected but you had to sell some stuff, but then you've gotten more things. Talk about when you started actually devoting a little bit of time and money towards the gathering of Star Wars items.
For me, dedicating my own time and money to gathering Star Wars items, I'm really, I think, weirdly picky. Like, I don't have any focused collection. I know there are some collectors who, try to get as many things as they can. There's some folks who will say focus on, collecting all the Funkos, for example, or they might collect a certain character, like as much R2-D2 memorabilia as they possibly can. Right. I've always been weirdly minimal about my collecting. When they had the Triple Force Friday thing, I was in a Target and they had about as much as I think was possibly available. And I had a bunch more stuff in my cart, but ultimately I only walked out of there with Lego. I have it here, actually. I still haven't put it together. A Lego A-Wing with Snap Wexley and Lieutenant Connix. And then I managed to get one of the, the carbonized Mandalorian.
Ooh, that's a good pull right there.
Those are sharp.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, not realizing I actually had both the regular and the carbonized one in my hands. And I thought, this carbonized one looks kind of cooler. I'll just go with this one instead. So it's awful. I know I should have, really been able to appreciate more, but it's after the fact, as I've seen people posting about it, I realized, oh, wow, I really lucked out on that.
You really did. No, you really did. I think our Target had 6.
Yep.
And then they have not replenished, so that's, and there were 6 guys.
There were 7 guys.
7 guys.
There were 7 guys waiting to get one.
There was one sad guy.
There's one, 6 satisfied, 1 sad. Yeah. No, but I think your approach, is probably the smartest approach. Be picky, because I don't know, Josh, you and I we've made some purchases of things where we're like, well, I'm glad I got it, but I'm probably not going to keep it.
Yeah.
And, we'll turn it around and trade it, for something else or whatever. But being picky, that's probably a pretty smart and frugal way to have a collection. Is there a character that you kind of gravitate towards, or is it just, you're just picky in general?
If there's anything I gravitate toward, it's anything snow related. So I have snow troopers and snow speeders, and I have Hoth Rebel troopers. So I really like anything snow related. And I grew up in Los Angeles, which is really weird. So why that spoke to me so strongly, I honestly have no idea. Now, of course, I live in New Hampshire, where we probably get about 120 inches of snow every winter. So I'm in the right place for it. But I would say if there's any particular thing I gravitate toward, it's probably that.
Well, I think, Alan, it's safe to say it's because just like Anakin Skywalker, you hate sand.
It really does get everywhere. Oh. He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Well, yeah.
What's your, so speaking of your collection, what's your favorite piece? That's what we call them pieces. That's, like they're pieces of art. So what's your favorite collecting piece?
Right now, I think I told you via Twitter direct messages the story about my collection when I was younger. I got rid of most of it, but I still have a few things, and one of them is a snow trooper, like an original vintage snow trooper, and that I'm very fond of. It's one small figure. It's not a big deal amongst everything, but I'm still very glad that I have that one, at least, that I didn't get rid of.
And that's from your childhood collection, though.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, see, I think that's just far more valuable. Yeah, that's really cool.
That's very cool.
As a matter of fact, I have a snow trooper, and he is one of my favorites. I don't even know if I could pick him out since I have several, but I found him when I bought an AT-AT from a collection, and I'd had it for a while, and then I opened up the battery compartment to put in some batteries to test it out. I don't know, a few months later. And there was a little snow trooper in there hiding, and he had his weapon and everything. And so I just thought, like, some kid, mom and dad didn't have the D batteries or whatever. So he's like, forget it. I'm going to hide from Luke in here. It was pretty cool. So yeah,
that's brilliant.
So good stuff.
Very cool.
Is there something now, like as an adult looking back, is there something that you wish you still had, or wish, or you think you might still get from that original vintage collection?
Yeah, every once in a while I look at eBay for original vintage snow speeders, and it's not like they're cost prohibitive. They're like $20-$30 when you find them. Right. And yeah, I don't know why I can't seem to just say yes to that. I mean, it seems so silly, and yet for some reason I just haven't done it. But that's number one, and then an AT-AT would be the second thing. Those two definitely would be the ones that I would hope to acquire again someday.
We've been asked, what's your favorite, Pete asked us that, what's your favorite vehicle? And I can't believe I forgot that. The sound that a snow speeder makes, I think, was my favorite as a kid. That was really cool. The snow speeder was always awesome because of the cool effects of it flying over the mountain range, but right before they find Han and Luke. So yeah, I'm with you there.
I've found them,
repeat.
Yeah. And the vintage toy too had probably, I don't know, in my opinion, the coolest sound and light combination that would light up the proton guns or whatever they were. They just wah, 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 and they'd alternate back and forth. And I don't know, I thought for vintage toys that had a pretty cool light setup. Yeah,
it did. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And you never see the snow speeder outside of Hoth, right? It's never in a squadron or anything else in Star Wars. So I don't know.
So they released a Lego set that was a sand speeder set. And it looked like it was set on Jakku because the background had like a fallen Star Destroyer. And for a while, people were saying, it was just a random pilot and a random gunner. And there was a rumor going around, are these Rey's parents? Did they mean to reveal them in The Last Jedi? But it was a snow speeder, but it was for the Jakku Desert. So it was a sand speeder.
That's cool.
And yeah, I thought, oh, that's cool. And I had seen it around, but didn't get it at the time. And then, of course, now they don't make it anymore. And now it's actually very expensive to get. But that's the only time I've ever seen a non-snow speeder T-47. They're T-47s. Is that right?
I think so.
That sounds right.
So it was just repurposed then for a different environment. Is that?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
They took out all the insulation. Installed an AC unit
and made it a convertible.
Turn the astromech into an AC unit, and away they went.
There you go.
So that's Alan. Let me ask you that just on that particular topic. Do you think they do those kind of things intentionally when they release a snow speeder repurposed for sand and it looks like Jakku's background, or do you think they're just trying to put merchandise out there?
I'm probably jaded and think that they're probably trying to put merchandise out there. And I don't resent them for it. I mean, they're in business, like they got to make money. So, by all means, go ahead. I don't think that there was any particular intention to tweak people into thinking, oh, they're revealing something. Or
they're not trying to add to canon, or they're not trying to add to like, hey, in the Battle of Jakku, there were snow speeders. You didn't see them, but if you read Aftermath, you can imagine they were there or something, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think so. Although I did have an exchange, like this is many years ago with Leland Chi from Lucasfilm, and he said that the Lego stuff still goes through the same vetting process that the rest of the new stories go through. And Pablo Hidalgo has said that all canon really means is, does any writer writing something new have to take into account the this particular item that's happened before? And when it comes to the Lego stuff, they don't. So if it's a Lego thing, then I say maybe not. But I don't know. They've revealed stuff, I think, via Lego stuff too.
So Alan, the real question I got out of that is, have you been blocked by Pablo?
Yes, I have been blocked by Pablo.
Well, then he's just blocking everyone. Come on.
That's his loss.
My personal Twitter account and the Star Wars 7x7 show account have both been blocked by Pablo. So yes, I've been double blocked, in fact.
Oh boy.
So maybe it's the cool thing to be.
Yeah, I guess maybe we're not.
If Pablo still has you on his list, you might be kind of an outcast at this point.
Definitely.
Yeah. I did feel sad. Did he block you guys too?
He blocked us like 6 months ago for no reason at all. Well, we'd never interacted with him.
I don't know, blockchains. I don't know exactly how and why, but my understanding is that there's if you don't want to follow anybody that follows a particular person, that you can put them on a blockchain, and then that just eliminates, in fear of, I don't know if it's fear, but just not having to deal with people of a certain opinion or whatever, I mean, I don't know. That's my understanding of it. And I'm not going to say that it's an expert opinion, but that's what I understand anyway.
Okay.
So maybe there's someone that you follow.
Hurt. I shouldn't be. I've met him like once or twice and exchanged like maybe half a dozen words. So had maybe 2 or 3 Twitter exchanges here and there. But there's no reason for him to not block me, especially since he's blocking far and wide.
Sure.
But I do feel a little hurt. Like, all honesty, I do.
Yeah. As of this recording, Alan, you have successfully gone 1,935 podcasts in a row. And, which is, to me, Josh and I were talking about this. I said, you're like the Cal Ripken of Star Wars podcasts. And Josh, what did you say?
I went Johnny Carson. I mean, for me, just like of Star Wars podcasts, because it was when we started getting into, creating our own pod. And obviously we just wanted to sit down and talk Star Wars and said, hey, why not? Let's record it. And you can tell that that's kind of the case around the community right now. Lots of new Star Wars pods popping up as the equipment gets less expensive and the quality gets better, and hosting isn't a big deal, et cetera. And so I was just like, look, when I first went and started researching other Star Wars pods to kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, look at the competition.
Or research.
Yeah, research, right? We're just looking, checking out how the other guys do it, what their format is, what they sound like. I found you. And, you know, of course, hit Andy up and I was like, hey, have you listened to 7x7? I said, it could be my favorite format ever. We had already recorded like 3 or 4 of our own pods. So we'd already established like what we were going to do. But I was like, it's 7 minutes. He gets right to the dang point. We get a little tidbit. And then before I know it, I'm 5 in and, you know, a half hour of my time, you know, no big deal. So, you know, it was, or 35 minutes, you know, whatever. But
let's do the math.
Let's do the math. So,
I get it.
yeah. So it was, you know, that's what I said is like, look, whenever I wanted, and heck, by the way, half of your pods, not to, you know, blow too much smoke here, but half of your pods, you know, gave me ideas for things that we could talk about on here. And so, like Andy said, I'm very, very, you know, impressed by, you know, what you do, your format, and man, the research that you put in is pretty cool. So I have a few questions on that.
Do you see yourself more as Johnny Carson or Cal Ripken? What's the better analogy?
Gosh, you know, and the strange thing is that I have a Johnny Carson comedy album. It's him being interviewed by somebody for the laugh.com website about the nature of comedy and how he approaches it. And it's actually stuck on my younger son's phone, and it came up in the car randomly tonight. And I said to him, you know, like, I know this seems, you know, old and slow and, you know, probably not your thing, but you like to be funny. You might want to check out something like this, because Johnny Carson was a really big deal back in his day. And it's now very strange for you guys to be mentioning Johnny Carson.
Go. We said it. Yeah, we said it 3 days ago. That's when we talked. And the reason, my point now, Johnny Carson, obviously hilarious. Yes. My point was just kind of, I guess, the clout. You know, for me, it's like, hey, do you got 2,000 podcasts under your belt about Star Wars? You know, I mean, this is the guy that's been around doing it when everyone was, you know, wondering what a podcast was. That's all. You know, the original. So there you go, Alan. That's how I feel about you. I think you're funny. I think you're funny too, by the way. Sorry.
Thank you for that too. Yeah, I don't think about it either those terms. And in fact, you know, like I look back and say the Forcecast, for example, which has gone through multiple iterations of hosts, but has been around for more than a decade. And yeah, that to me seems like the high bar of longevity. It is a special kind of insanity to be doing a daily show and to be nearing 2,000 episodes. But yeah, I guess I've never really thought of myself in that particular fashion. It's always been, there's a Woody Allen movie, Zelig, where, like, among other personalities he takes on, somehow he ends up flying a plane backwards and upside down across the Atlantic Ocean in the 1930s. And he says something like, well, it just goes to show you what you can do when you're insane, or something like that. And that's kind of how I felt about doing
That's what you're doing?
Like, it's a very particular and niche kind of insanity. Yeah. But I love it. And you know, this is the honest truth. I have never had a day, a night where I've sat down and thought to myself, ugh, I don't want to do the show. Like, do I really have to do this? You know, and I know I've set myself up for the commitment of it by saying it's a daily, but I've never had the situation. I've had the, oh my gosh, what am I going to talk about? What's it going to be about? And, you know, those kind of frantic moments from time to time, but never, I don't want to do this, which is just amazing.
That's pretty awesome, man. And we're glad that you do, because we've gotten a lot out of entertainment out of listening to you.
And you're always, hold on, I'll stay on that real quick. And you always do have a topic, though. I like to view your pod as, you know, what I like about it is your insight into the workings behind the, you know, in the industry. That's what I like. Is like, hey, because they had a board meeting, that means we're probably going to get a trailer because they're going to release their, you know, their quarterly earnings, and, you know, and that's like, whoa, that's a really good angle, and they've done that in the past. And, you know, where do you get that kind of info, or is that part of your life outside of Star Wars?
It's just developed over time. I mean, and it's not always correct. Like, for example, here we are about to get a trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, and 3 previous December releases, they had the trailer debut on Columbus Day, and they didn't do it this time.
Yeah.
So, it's not always correct, but it's looking back at history. And I was slower on the Disney earnings calls in realizing, oh yeah, they actually do usually say something during those. It's probably worth paying attention. It took me a couple of years before I started factoring that into my machinations. But it's experience of having done it more than anything else, and being a daily show, just needing something to talk about, and so needing to be aware of who else is talking about things.
Now, I've heard you mention a few times that you have been sent books or comics maybe a little bit ahead of time, or maybe right when they released. Does that happen often? Do you get things a little bit ahead now that you've kind of been at this for a while? And has that ever gotten you any toys or anything?
Any cool collectibles?
Sadly, no toys. No.
All right.
Not at all. But the books, it's kind of hit and miss. For example, the Be More Leia and Be More Vader books that I just talked about that came from DK.
Yep.
Those ones arrived after they were published. I did get a copy of Spark of the Resistance by Justina Ireland, which is part of the Journey to the Rise of Skywalker, and is supposed to tell a story that takes place in between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. But I did not get it on publication day. I got it a few days later. And I think there was a thing, I used to get review copies actually from Del Rey and get them early, but somewhere along the line, someone got an early review copy of one of the Aftermath novels and published a bunch of stuff from it on, I don't know, I think it was Reddit or something. And that, made the Del Rey folks really mad, as, of course they should be. And so they've been really tight with that stuff since then. And now, like the adult stuff, I actually get I get deliveries from time to time from Penguin Random House Audio. So I'll get the audiobook versions, and I've done interviews with some of the producers and vocal talent there, the narrators. So I have a pretty good relationship with Penguin Random House, and that's how, I'll get stuff delivered to me sometimes, but no toys, unfortunately.
Not yet. Not yet.
No, not yet. That's right. Not yet.
Well,
so yeah, hope springs eternal for sure, but not in that regard just yet.
Maybe at Celebration, you'll have to shake some hands with some people from Lego, or
right?
Some, Funko's based out of Everett, Washington. Maybe you need to take a little field trip up here. And
we know a guy too. Matt, right?
Yeah. So recently let me backtrack here. One of my favorite things that you do is your one question interviews. Right. I love those.
Thank you.
And I know when you were at Celebration, you probably had about 2 weeks worth of podcasts.
Yeah,
up,
you had them all logged up. Yep.
Those were great though. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed them. What is prior to this celebration, had you done the one question interviews before?
Yeah. That's been my MO for all the celebrations I've been to.
Cool. Is it always the same question?
No, it is not.
Okay. All right.
So in Anaheim in 2015, it was why Star Wars, and I just left it open ended, and let the people, just however they wanted to answer it, and the answer were pretty much all over the board and talked about a lot of different things. In London, it was what's most exciting to you about Star Wars right now. In 2017 in Orlando, because it was the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, I asked people what their favorite Star Wars memory was. And in Chicago, because Chicago's the home of Oprah Winfrey, I asked her favorite question, which is when it comes to Star Wars, well, it's not the Star Wars part, but when it comes to Star Wars, what do you know for sure? Yeah. And so now I've got about 10 months to come up with a new one for Anaheim next year.
Oh, that's
pretty
cool.
Good.
Yeah, those are, like I said, those are my favorite. And every answer is different, and they're all good. And I I love them. I'm going to have to go back and listen to previous celebrations just to listen to them. Were you able to ask any, I know, let's see. I'm trying to remember, like, I think you asked Timothy Zahn. I want to say what do you know for sure, but what have you been able to ask any of those questions to like Mark Hamill or some of the bigger name folks, or how's that worked out?
Unfortunately not. And
the restraining order is that.
Well, I actually ran into both Donald Faison and Bobby Moynihan on the convention floor in Chicago, and they had handlers around them saying, no interviews. So, even a 1-question interview, I wasn't allowed to do it, unfortunately. I would say the biggest get, if you will, was Rob Bredow, who's the head of ILM.
Yeah.
And I got to meet with him because he had done the Solo book, the book documenting the visual effects for Solo: A Star Wars Story, and so I ended up connecting with the publicist of the book because it was actually just launching right then, and managed to arrange the interview through her. But yeah, the folks at Lucasfilm, actually, I got to do interviews with some of them back in Anaheim in 2015, but with Progressive Celebrations, they've said, sorry, we can't do it. Sorry, we're not allowed to. And, they've all been very, nice and polite and, aw shucks about it. But, I haven't been able to get any of the Lucasfilm folks on unless it's like Rob, where it was because he was promoting a book and because the publisher had as much. But authors and artists and stuff like that I've been able to do, but actors, unfortunately not.
Tougher on the actors.
Well, the artists at least in Comic-Cons that we've attended, artists and authors have been the most accessible. So that seems about right, I suppose.
Yeah,
we met Timothy Zahn too. Or at least I did. We didn't ask him any questions though, did we? No, we're still too scared, Alan. We're still figuring this out. We get a little braver now. Yeah.
I had Timothy Zahn, and it was in Orlando, and I was about to interview him, and somebody called me, and I was using my iPhone to record it, and so I did not follow the advice of put your phone on airplane mode before you do an interview. So I actually botched in the middle of an interview with Timothy Zahn, and he is like, you're in his presence and you're like, you start to get nervous. There's some level of seriousness that emanates from him that you're like, oh my gosh, I've screwed this up.
Right. And I got seriously starstruck by Carl Weathers. I was just like, oh yeah, I was in complete awe because for one, you're looking at Apollo, right? I mean, that was, or Predator. I forget his name in Predator, but it was just, and he's such a cool dude, and he's still just ripped. I mean, he's a big guy. Yeah. And he was so nice. He was so nice. So I got starstruck, and I wanted to ask him some questions. It ended up some kind of corny joke about Happy Gilmore, and which I'm sure he's never heard before. Oh, your hand grew back or something stupid like that. I think that was literally it. But he was so cool, and I got tremendously starstruck by him, and was like, all right, we gotta go. Yeah, I
believe it. I would have been too.
So, Alan, a couple pods ago on your pod, you had talked about the AMC theaters doing all of the Star Wars movies in a row leading up to the Rise of Skywalker. So that inspired me. Thank you very much. That I put a poll up on our pod or up on our Twitter site and asked if you had the time, if you had the availability, could you do a 27-hour marathon, Star Wars marathon? And would you like to hear the results, Alan?
Yes, I would.
So right at about 140 people voted. This is just in the last 24 hours. And it's pretty overwhelming, 75% to 25%. Yes, they would. If they had the availability, they would do it. And I gave the option of people who felt comfortable putting down their age, or at least their age range. And there were, I would say about half of them were in their 40s. that posted.
Okay.
So,
Which seems like a false positive here, since none of them could stay awake that long. So.
yeah. But
You're talking to somebody in his 40s.
I know.
Hey.
You're talking to somebody in his 40s.
yeah, we're all in the same boat here. But I don't know. I found it telling that even now, you're at the end. I kind of feel a little Harry Pottery now, at the end, people are still like willing to power marathon over a day's worth of Star Wars movies to get to the Rise of Skywalker, just for the sake of being a fan and enjoying the ride along the way. And I don't know, I found that pretty telling, even though most are probably in the age bracket that we are in. There were definitely, the other half would be, 20s and 30s. Probably there was as young as 16, as old as 56 on Twitter there, as far as our followers are concerned. But about half are in the 40s. The other half were everybody else. But 75% said, yeah, they'd do a 27-hour, oh my goodness, buckle in. And for some, it was like, well, if I could do it at home, I don't know if I could do a theater for 27 hours and, whatever, but still that's small potatoes as far as I'm concerned. So fans are still fans, despite what you might hear, from Twitter, from other social medias. The fandom is strong. Star Wars fans are awesome.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I got to say, if they had, I think maybe my choice might have been different if they said, oh, and you'll also watch Rogue One and Solo also, and not as a negative or a knock on either of those two movies. It's just that would add another 4.5 hours and push us into 31, 32. And I'm like, well, it's less than 30, so maybe I can do it. But I think if they had said all of them, I've been, I don't know.
Well, maybe it's like actual marathon runners that once you get to about mile 18, it all just kind of blends together anyway. So maybe if you did 27, 31 isn't really that much more of a reach.
Maybe. Did you guys go? Did you see the marathon when they released The Force Awakens?
No,
I didn't either.
No,
I did it when they did the special editions. I went. We had a place that did all three, and I did that, but I didn't do it prior to Force Awakens.
No,
got it.
And there have been times where, like on Saturday, we'll do the prequel trilogy, and then on Sunday we'll do the original trilogy. But this was before the sequels. But I have like powered through 6 in a weekend before.
Last weekend, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
But I've never undertaken something as daunting. I mean, I've even done like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, kind of along those same lines too. But no, I've never done them all just like back to 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 back.
I try, and if you go in, I forget the name of the site that gives you like the perfect way to watch Star Wars as you mix in all the animation stuff with, Clone Wars and Rebels, and then throw in the extra story stuff like the Solo and Rogue One. And they have, somebody made a roadmap, like watch these episodes from the animations, and then watch this movie in this order, but it's not the order you think, and don't watch this movie at all. It doesn't matter. But every time I just go chronological, and I try and start with, number 1, episode 1, and make it, I don't know, 45 minutes in, and then give up on my marathon. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Although I did start New Hope with my daughter the other night. I put that up on Twitter. We were putting together Legos, and man, it's good. It's so good when you're watching to analyze it. Like you're really watching every scene. You're listening to the dialogue. Where are they looking? What's in the background? Which I couldn't do as a kid because I was just it was so magical to me that everything that happened was almost just reigniting my memories instead of me focusing on it. It was just like, yeah. I love this part too. I love this part too. And so to watch it analytically is quite a bit of fun.
And your daughter liked it too, right?
She did. She's asking tons of questions. And then the one part, which wasn't a joke,
better.
The one part, on comes Harrison Ford, and she goes, my gosh, he's good looking. I'm like, you shut up. She's 15. She's 15. And I mean, this is like 70s hairdos. And, Harrison, I always said once, always looked like perpetually like 39, even when he wasn't 39 in New Hope. He's in his 20s, wasn't he? Or early 30s, maybe. I don't know. But he just always looked like your dad's good looking best friend or something. Or I don't know. But she's like, man, he's good looking. Smack back of her head. Be quiet.
This is a good segue here, Alan. Because with me and my 3 kids, my kids are ages 12 to 3, and Josh has a couple of daughters that are
15 and 11. And, they're around us, which means they're around some of the Star Wars stuff that we inherit and buy and are always talking about and stuff. How have your kids responded to Star Wars? Have they kind of taken up, toys, collecting a little bit, or are they going to follow in Dad's footsteps, or what's it like for you?
It's really interesting to see how much. So I have 2 boys; they're 17 and 12, and how they have interacted with toys, or rather, not interacted with toys in general. My older son did play with, action figures here and there, but it was more the giant size action figures, not like the Titan series ones that they have now, but like there's a name for them, and I'm sorry, I'm going to forget it. But there were younger kid friendlier action figures of Luke and Han and Chewie and Anakin and C-3PO and R2-D2. So they were like bigger and stockier and less articulation. And they came with these little things like Han's came with something that kind of looked like the stap thing that battle droids fly around on in the Phantom Menace, except it was white and had a cockpit on it that looks like the Falcon's cockpit. And that thing,
I remember that.
Came with him. Yeah. And I still have those. I kept those, but he just wasn't necessarily into action figures in general. And it didn't matter whether we put Star Wars stuff in front of him or Marvel or DC or whatever, like it just didn't necessarily take. And it was the same with my younger son too, like just toys and I'm, wondering if it's just a matter of a generational thing with video games and screens and endless entertainment. Just, we tried to give them opportunities to fire their imagination and not so much. Legos didn't really go well with my older son, and my younger son doesn't particularly care about Legos, but he says if I get a Lego set, he wants to build it with me, which is great. I'm perfectly happy to do that. But yeah, the love of collecting stuff from Star Wars, or any other particular entertainment franchise has not stuck with them. And even over the past, I'll say, from tween years on, they stopped wanting to wear entertainment branded things. So they don't wear Star Wars t-shirts, but they don't wear Pokemon t-shirts or Batman or Superman or Captain America or anything like that. They just, and that's, I don't know how common that is necessarily, but that's just the way it sort of evolved in our household, that they sort of have their own particular tastes. And, it's definitely different, and it's not what I would have expected or predicted, but they are 2 wonderful human beings. And I'm just thrilled that they get excited when, I say, hey, guess what? The Rise of Skywalker trailer is coming out tonight. And they're like, really? Yeah. And my younger son is disappointed because his bedtime comes before the trailer is going to get released. I'm like, dude, I'll show it to you first thing in the morning. And, I have to try and talk my older son into not watching it tonight. So that way, even though he'll be up for it, like he has to stay away from it so the 2 of them can see it at the same time.
That's cool. You're probably doing the right thing by not forcing it on them.
Well, I think, my girls like to tongue in cheek it with me a little bit, like, oh, Dad, you're such a nerd. Or when a package shows up and I open it up and they're like, what's in there? They'll be curious, and then I'll open it up and it'll be a Black Series figure or a Hasbro Pulse item. And I'm like, oh, brother. And they'll roll their eyes. Yet I'll come back into the room and my youngest is like picking it up and turning it over in her hands a little bit. And I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. What is this? And then my biggest girl last night, she just likes, her avenue with me is like, she loves Lego. She's like, I'll put a Lego together all day. And then she kind of softens up a little bit to like, yeah, let's throw on some Star Wars. And then like we already said, she starts asking questions. I mean, but they'll, when they're all done, they'll be like nerd and leave the room, which is totally fine.
That's more about the age. What I think is going to happen for all three of us is that whether our kids end up really getting into Star Wars to any sort of degree that we have kind of gotten into it, what they're going to do is that, when we are old and possibly gone, they're going to think of Star Wars in a sentimental way because it reminds them of Dad.
Sure.
And and at the very least, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. They'll keep one or two things. They won't sell off all my stuff. They'll keep a couple things just because it reminds them of Dad.
No, you'll put it in the coffin with you.
I mean, maybe one or two things. If we got,
he's going to get buried in a vintage Millennium Falcon box.
And I saw before we started that there's a sail barge kicking around there. Is that going in the coffin?
Oh, you saw that box? It is big enough to house at least a cut up Andy.
My wife would fit in a box about that size.
Anakin
very
Andy.
easily.
And Anakin Andy, we could stuff him in there with no arms, no legs.
No, I did not miss that at all.
Nice pull. Nice pull.
Immediately went,
it's good. Yeah, we actually did a barge. One of our first forays into YouTube, which has probably our last was doing a barge opening party and multiple angles. And, we had a flyby camera going through the barge and all that stuff. You're much better at the YouTubes than we are.
Well, what you're doing sounds very complex compared to what I do, which is just, I have a tripod and a mount for the phone. And I do have a microphone that I plug into the iPhone, and that's it. And it's just one camera. I'm not changing focus. And, if the podcast gets to a point where it supports more of our lives, then I'll be able to spend a little more time on editing and, getting other footage in the thing and all that. But what you're talking about with that, barge opening party sounds way more complex than anything that I'm doing. So,
which is probably why yours works.
Yeah.
And ours didn't. Simplicity is usually best.
Yeah. So tonight is the big last trailer for the Rise of Skywalker. And there's already been a couple of little clip leaks over the weekend just to kind of let everybody know and prepare who isn't, heavily invested into the Star Wars universe. But I've already seen a couple of shots that I have a lot of questions on. There's a shot of, I guess we can get to maybe just, I don't know, as we kind of get close to the end here, but what do you have just from anything that you've seen so far over the weekend, Alan? Is there anything that maybe has given you an idea of, oh, this might happen? I don't want to go so far as to say predictions or expectations. I guess we don't want to say expectations because never, because that ends badly usually.
Yeah.
But maybe some, like for me, I guess I'll go ahead and start. But for me, the really quick shot of looked like a bunch of rebel ships and the Millennium Falcon kind of drops out and speeds up towards the camera. And it's just a quick flip of the screen, but right next to it, it is very clearly seen is the Ghost from Rebels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that gets me excited because I love Rebels. And I love that you got a clip that you just got a shot of the Ghost in Rogue One, as well as, Chopper buzzing around in the background of one scene. Like, I love that. Do you think that's just an Easter egg? Because, at this point, everybody kind of knows about, Ghost, and it's been an Easter egg in another movie. And is it just an Easter egg, or does it possibly have a role to play in this movie, or Hera's son, Jason, or something like that? Do you think it's more than just an Easter egg?
Oh, you're bringing Jason into this. The fact that J.J. Abrams has said, we're not wrapping up one trilogy. We're wrapping up 3 trilogies.
Right.
Obviously Rebels is not part of the trilogies, technically speaking, but that's in there. And yeah, I think it's probably the Ghost 2. And I've been thinking for quite a while, what if Zori Bliss is actually Harrison Dula? And, because the helmet is so odd. And I'm just wondering, could she tuck her head tails in the back of that helmet? I don't know. But I do think that it's going to be less Easter eggy than it's been in the past, because they are aware that they're ending everything. And so I think they're going to be a little more overt with some things, but I do think there are still going to be things that it's just too much for them to be able to completely name check it in a very obvious way. Somebody called my attention to a Twitter thread where somebody was actually taking the time to very painstakingly identify every ship in that shot.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. Have you seen that?
I have. It's very cool.
Yeah. And so somebody said, is that the Shadowcaster, which is some ship that also appeared in Star Wars Rebels? And I can't think of the character's name right now, but like it's a deep enough cut that one I feel like is probably just a straight up Easter egg, versus the Ghost appearing. That feels like it's major enough that it's going to be addressed in some more overt fashion. So I think they're going to be a little more overt with some things, but there will still be Easter eggy stuff for people who want to go nuts.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, one of the big questions about, the Resistance at this point is, where are they going to get any sort of army together to fight back? And, that people say, well, maybe they could get, characters from the Resistance cartoon. Or maybe pull back, some characters from Rebels that are still around, and I think that's more of, those are easy dots to connect, but, and it would be kind of cool to see, a cartoon come to life, that part of it would be cool. But I'm so leery about thinking too much about it, because I don't want to get too into my head about it, and then,
but aren't we okay with some very blatant name drops? We're okay with that. I mean, they made like Expendables 3 for Pete's sakes. I mean, this is a society that's okay with like, oh, it's Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah. That's what you want, is like, yeah, I wouldn't mind if they were just like, boom, Ghost is here. Here's 30 seconds, Hera or Jason, whoever's driving it, nod, we got it, and then on to the next clip, onto the next ship, onto the next character.
There's Kaz in his fighter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Everyone just kind of lines up, right stuff style, and starts marching towards the battle. I'm cool with that. I'm okay with a little bit of cheese at that level, as long as they've done the rest okay. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So,
it's a high five
Avengers
moment.
Endgame almost.
Yeah, it's a high. Yeah, exactly. Did that fail? Heck no. That was cool. Everyone's like, yeah, we get it.
Yeah, this is going to have a Rebels assemble kind of a moment to it.
That.
That's totally fine. I don't even think it's a ripoff at this point.
No, it was original. They came up with it, right?
Well, that's their only option at this point, right? I mean, I've been shocked and completely in disbelief about the notion that this could possibly be taking place in universe a year after the events of The Last Jedi. And for the longest time, I was saying it's got to be 5 to 10 years, because how are they going to muster the force to combat the First Order based on what happened in The Last Jedi? But I think, and I haven't read the Allegiance comic book series yet. That's the one where they're supposed to be going back to see about whether the Mon Cala can muster up any support for the Resistance. But yeah, now like there were little pieces, and like, okay, I guess it really is a year later. So where are they going to find it? And I was thinking Ryloth, maybe, because it was always, still independent, like it never joined the New Republic. And so in theory, they must have something that they've developed to be able to take care of themselves, and maybe they would be able to pitch in, but I don't think, the Free Ryloth movement could handle the First Order on their own. So yeah, it's just going to be a ragtag fleet, basically.
Which is okay. That's how we did it the first time and the second time.
Yeah. And, it only took them a movie in the prequels to come up with a whole clone army. So maybe there's one lurking somewhere around it. Maybe there's one in the
Thrawn. No,
Yeah.
Wrong side.
Yeah. No, I don't think they'd go that route.
You don't think they're bringing Thrawn? Yeah.
I don't think they're bringing Thrawn. I don't think they're bringing another clone army either. But
Right.
There is something there, though, actually, and I've seen this discussed as a possible theory, but not as a rumor or a leak or a spoiler, just a fan theory thing.
Just kind of whispered in the dark corners of social media, kind of thing.
Yeah, a reminder that there was in the original Thrawn novels in the old expanded universe that there was a Dreadnought Fleet.
Yep.
And there were multiple, like hundreds of ships that could be controlled.
Yeah, they were like AI. There was like an AI fleet, right? It was
right, exactly. And so when you saw in the footage in that they've previously shown where you see all those Star Destroyers lined up.
Yeah, see? I think I said, yes, go. I think I said that. I was like, that reminds me of that fleet from Thrawn. Good one.
Yeah.
Or maybe you said it and I just listened to your pod.
Also possible.
Maybe. It wasn't my idea originally. I came across it and thought, oh, that could be something.
It could be. It could be right there. Just a dead fleet that they go and find or something.
I mean, at this point, it's as good as idea as any out there. Prior to watching this trailer, we can't rule anything out, I suppose.
By the way, it's on StarWars.com now.
Yeah, I just saw the pop-up.
Oh, it's happened.
It's there. It happened.
It's out there.
And man, Alan, thanks so much for joining us while there was a Star Wars trailer in the background. I can't believe you stuck through it. You never even faded out where I thought maybe you went away for 2 minutes to watch it or anything. So that's fantastic.
Or maybe he walked off while we were talking or something. Yeah. I don't know. It was a good fake job.
I shut it off completely. I had the phone shut off and everything. So, awesome. Utterly and completely focused on chatting with you guys.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much, man. Just love talking with you. I still have like 100 more questions, which is great, which means I can't wait to have you on again. I mean, I could really dive into your method. And the one thing that I really like is when I get on and I listen to Star Wars 7x7, I'm going to get good information, a positive spin. Yeah, you'll throw your opinion in and go, I don't know about this, which is fine. I love that so that I can go figure out if I know about it or not, and then move on. So it's if anyone gets anything out of this pod, it's go listen to Alan on Star Wars 7x7, period. You have to. That's why I was joking about coming up with that fleet on my own. It's probably because I heard it in my sleep, because there's a lot of times I turn your pod on to go to bed and I get like 3 or 4 in before I nod off. So there you go. No offense to your pod, just I'm tired. All right. That's all. But it's a good way for me.
You are not the first person to have said that to me, actually.
You got a great voice, man. You got a great voice. I'm out in 7 minutes. That's perfect. I'm all done.
Yeah. Alan, you're my commute to work in the morning. So I listen to every word you say and I hang on it. So.
He does not sleep during your podcast.
Driving, I hope not.
So Alan, before we wrap up here, you have a TED Talk coming out on based off of your podcast. Do you want to give that a quick little plug?
Sure. So it's a TEDx talk, which just means that it's not the official TED conference, but they license out the name of it to do these sort of TED-like events in local communities all over the world. And so there happens to be one in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's called TEDx Amaskag Milliard. And I was lucky enough to be nominated for it and had to submit a suggestion for what I would do a talk about. And I suggested doing a talk about the nature of hope and how it's expressed in the Star Wars movies. And hope is kind of a concept that we don't all have a great handle on. I mean, we all know what hope is in some intuitive way, and we use the word hope like, I hope the Jets defense scores enough points so I win my fantasy football match tonight, right? Like that.
False
hope. Very, in a very disposable way. But hope is a really powerful idea, and it has become part of the fabric of Star Wars, and they've even leaned on it a little more heavily in these last few movies as well. And so I pitched the idea of trying to help explain the nature of hope with insights from Star Wars and how the lessons of Star Wars could allow us to, reignite the spark of hope in our own lives, no matter what our particular circumstances are. And they, picked it out of, there were like 40 some odd submissions altogether, and I was one of 10 or so that got picked for it. And so November 16th is a Saturday. I'll be delivering the TED Talk, and I guess I'll be recording it too. So it will be available on video at some point in the future too. And that's the scoop in a nutshell.
That's so cool.
That's very cool. I'm a big fan of TED Talks and the TEDx Talks as well. We even use them I'm a teacher. We've used TED Talks in my classroom sometimes. And so
sounds like a great topic.
Yeah, we might have to watch that one as a class.
Sure.
I know. Have to sit down and
hope it's good.
Is it going to be more than 7 minutes, Alan?
Yes, it will. Yes. It will.
Is it 15? Isn't that TED Talks are 15, right? Or do they let you go a little longer?
I think my limit is 18, but
okay, yeah.
I'm probably not going to go 18. In all honesty, and I haven't said this anywhere else, but I will probably aim for 14 because 7 by 7. So 7 plus 7 instead of 7 times 7, but still.
While drinking a 7 and 7?
Well, Alan,
for sure.
Alan, at this point, you've nearly done 9 of your own podcasts with us here in one. So it's so cool to have you on. Andy, you got any final words?
No, just thank you a whole bunch. I know there's a bit of a time difference between us, but you were gracious enough. I knew you were going to be up watching the trailer anyway, so I know it's not that big of a reach for you, but no, seriously, we're big fans. Keep doing what you're doing. I don't know what's going to happen if you should happen to miss a day. Like, what do we do, Alan?
Yeah, I don't know.
What happens if you miss a day?
We need the whole Superman turn time back and let's start over. Alan, you preload though, right? We didn't ask you that. Like, Alan,
how many do you have just in case you get like the flu?
Do you ever do like 28 minutes in one day and then just load it up? You're good for the rest of the weekend.
I just had this conversation with some folks because not to get too morbid, but what happens if I hit a bereavement situation where, we have a death in the family that I need to deal with. And I think ultimately the decision was that I will probably go back into the archives and just say, hey, I'm so sorry out because we've had a death in the family. Here's an episode from the past for you to check out. Oh God, I had to bring it down like that.
No, you're fine. No, that totally makes sense.
It's life,
or a
man.
wedding, or maybe a wedding,
or a birth of a child.
Sure.
I mean, there's reasons.
Yes. We were lucky enough to go on a cruise ship as a family after Celebration Orlando. And so I recorded all the one question interviews and I loaded all of those so that way I wouldn't have to try to do episodes from a cruise ship.
And you just hit schedule, right? Just hit schedule and away they went. That's so cool.
But that's really, it's actually rare that I preload. More often than not, I'm day by day. And I've been trying to get them done earlier in the day because, the later I'm awake, then, the tougher the next day is. But for the most part, I am day by day and not preloading.
Great. And you want to tell everyone where they can find you on Twitter and I know Patreon as well, right?
Thank you. So it's SW7x7.com is home base for the show. Every social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon are all SW7x7. So Facebook.com/SW7x7, Patreon.com/SW7x7. And thank you so much for supporting me and the show also, by the way. And Twitter is SW7x7 podcast.
Well, cool, man. Thank you so much for coming on with us. We very much appreciate it. And we're excited to hear what you got lined up for us in the next week with the new trailer dropping and new things to talk about, I'm sure. But thanks again, Alan, from the Holochronicles Podcast.
Thanks, man. It's been awesome. It's been a pleasure. So take care, Alan.
Andy, Josh, I had a great time. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good one.
You too.
Mace lives.
This party's over.
What you say, Mace?
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
Oh, snap.
For your own good, stay out of
Mace talking big.
If what you've told me is true, you will have gained my trust.
Mistrust